So how do you guys feel about saying goodbye? Don't take that as an offer. I'm sorry to report that I'm sticking around. This isn't the last episode. I mean, I know we've seen a atrocious decline in viewership, listenership, all of the above, despite my millions of marketing dollars. As previously discussed, I don't know what I'm doing with those dollars. So for that very obvious reason, we're getting nowhere with the numbers. So yeah, I'm calling it. No, that's exactly the opposite of what's happening. I have every ambition of carrying this shenanigans, Unclear, forwards into the future. However, I'm feeling of a certain mood. I'm feeling of a certain vibe. Stasera, because I am saying goodbye to some aspects of this podcast, specifically where I record it. This delightful, what are we going to call this? A chair? A chaise longue? A couch, maybe? We're not approaching a couch. I would say a couch you can fit at least two people on. Wowie. But maybe like a therapist couch, that kind of vibe, right? I guess that's the vibe I'm trying to, go for here. But you see me with my foliage back here. I got more, I think, slightly off camera here. This environs is what I'm saying goodbye to. Apart from all the travel I was talking about on the last episode, going back home, seeing my family, doing that whole trip, I'm now doing a very different trip, which is going back to Toronto for a bit. So I'm really hoping that, the mic will last the journey, and we can keep the recording process up. But I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what's going to happen when it comes to the video part. I've got no idea what's going to happen when it comes to the room, the place that I'll be recording in. I'm going to try and hit some kind of frequency, regularity, I suppose. But it's going to be a new challenge, and I'm willing to take on that challenge. But as I say, there is a goodbye. There is a leaving that's happening. And so, there's some sadness here, and I'm sorry to get emotional on you so early in the episode, but it is sadness that I feel. And not just for the sake of the podcast, obviously, but it is sad to leave Rome, because I'll be going back to Toronto for a fair while. The next episode, hopefully, as I say, will be recorded there. So, if I bring these out, maybe none of this will mean anything. But I know that as I lie in this chair right now and record, that's wonderful. But the editing will probably not be done while I'm in this country, and neither will the release. And that just adds to the anxiety and the fear and the intensity of emotion that I'm feeling surrounding this particular goodbye. I'm leaving Rome for, potentially up to 6 months. I'm going back to Toronto. Got lots to do there, lots of people to see. Can't wait to see those people. Like, I really am so excited to see, people I really care about, people I haven't seen for a long time. If I have seen them, last time I went, it wasn't for long enough. I feel enriched by being in their presence, and I'm super excited to see each and every one of them, catch up, see where they're at, and just be in their presence again, and be around all these people that I care about. But it's hard. It's hard to leave. And I realized that, I'm not just talking about here and now and this leaving and this particular departure, but I struggle with leaving. I struggle with saying goodbye. I struggle with, closing a chapter and moving on to the next one. And I find that particularly strange because because I do it so often. I realize as I've gone home recently and as I've caught up with people back home, or even the people that I'm planning to catch up with in Toronto and everywhere that I know people. The truth is that my life now sits kind of in contrast to quite a few of those friends of mine because they are doing things that I am jealous of. Wonderful things like getting married, settling down, buying houses, putting down roots. And those things are fantastic. And I hear the happiness that those friends are achieving. But the truth is that, for a while, it'll be 7 years around now, in fact. Gosh, that's true. That I've sort of defined my life by doing the exact opposite, by traveling, by being different places. And, if you've tuned into any of these episodes so far, I'll have rattled off those top 3, probably more times than you care to count. But that's the truth. I've spent the last however long between those 3 places, and each of them mean a great deal to me. And yet I don't seem to tire of moving between them. And of course, moving between them means saying goodbye. And even before that, when I was only living in England, there's still moving around, of course. It's like you leave home to go to university. You leave university to go to, well, for me, it was to go back home briefly, a year or so, and then back to the same city where I went to university, lived there, worked there, left there again, moved to London. So it's always moving, saying goodbye. And I really struggle. I struggle because it seems like a very intense emotional moment, always. And as I approach in a moment like that, I get a great deal of anxiety. And the moment takes on even more weight. And I do see it as like, it's not just, I'm moving my stuff from one corner of the country or the globe to another. But it is a chance to turn the page, end the chapter, begin the next. And in so doing, like in a book, the purpose of a chapter is to sort of encapsulate that part of the story. And so inevitably, you sort of take stock of where, in the book, where the character is, or in life, where you are. And so, of course, in my view and in my understanding of these things, every time I say goodbye to somewhere, it prompts a lot of questions about taking stock. Who am I? Am I meant to be here, or am I meant to be there? What does it mean for me to be in either or both of those places? What about the friends I met here? What about the friends I left behind? What about the friends I'm going to? What about the connections? We've now taken it further. What about the languages I'm speaking? What about the mode of life that I'm living in? Is coming in it that it's coming to an end now? What has been its significance? Does it continue to have a significance, that way of life, that environment? And again, who am I in each of those? Does this chapter define more than just this period of time? And does it mean more instead in the general narrative, should there be one, of my existence? Like, I recognize, obviously, that I'm not a character in a book, that I'm not a fiction. It's not being written. Sure. Even though, in the grandest days, it's nice to think of it like that. But the fact of the matter is that when you look back, even not that far, but of course, as we get older, we'll be able to look back further. And the fact of the matter is that you can organize life into those chapters. And for me, I find that they are neatly subdivided by those moves. Like, wow, when I moved from London to Toronto, this also happened. And I was kind of ending that relationship and starting that one. And I don't just mean romantic. I'm talking about friendships as well. Like, things close and other things open when you change location like that. Mostly circumstantially, but of course because like those friendships and those connections and those situations define what you learn and define what you do and define perhaps your happiness and your sadness, or at least provide context to it. Again, okay, sure, it's just circumstantial and it's just a postcode, but because when you're looking back and you're summing up, you think about those moments of happiness, and you think about those people who are there, and you think about the background that you're in. So of course, it's not just circumstance, and circumstance defines what it is that ultimately we come to take meaning from. Surely. So, like I say, all of this kind of like weighs on me a lot when I know something is coming up, and especially with this kind of international, well, with any kind of moving. If you're moving from one apartment to the next, you know it's coming up. You know you have a date. You got to put things in boxes. You got to organize yourself. You got to organize your stuff, your clothes, your books. Maybe your kitchen's like half the size. Maybe it's double the size. And so you're like, well, what kind of meals do I cook? And when you can do all of that in a moving truck, it puts you in a certain frame of mind, because you can take furniture and you can take every single item from the kitchen, even if it is going to be half the size, because like you've just got the space. But then on the other side of it, if you're doing a move like I am now, like it's just long enough to be a move and not a vacation, but it's not long enough to justify like sending boxes across the Atlantic. So I'm filling out a luggage and the question becomes, who am I in 23 kilograms worth of stuff? Right? Like, not that I like to think of myself as that materialistic, but the truth is like, well, on these days, I want to be wearing this not because I like necessarily like wearing those clothes, but more like, oh, well, I want to pack these kind of shirts and these kind of shoes because I want to be at those kind of events. Like, I want to wear it. I want to pack a nice shirt because I want to think that the next 6 months of my life is going to involve occasions where I need a nice shirt and I need to look good. So it's not about the material of the shirt and it's not about the owning of the stuff, but it's more like, what am I packing in this bag in preparation for, in terms of the life that I want to lead when I unpack this bag? And again, there's an intensity of decision making when you've only got one bag, one luggage, 23 kilograms to check in, and that's not even factoring in the fear of what if the goddamn airline lose that goddamn bag, right? But I think, again, what weighs on me is ultimately that you know when that day is coming. Because what it throws into relief, really, is that so much of life you don't know when it's coming. You don't know when events will occur, when unexpected things will happen. They are, by definition, unexpected. You don't have a date marked in the calendar that says this is the day that this will happen to you. But moving and saying goodbye that comes with the moving, saying goodbye to whether it's just four walls or saying goodbye to the people that occupy those four walls with you or the context around those four walls, that has a date. It is in the calendar. There is a before and after, and you know the before and after days, weeks, maybe months in advance. And so maybe not everybody feels this. Maybe people feel the pressure of like, oh man, I got to get my shit sorted by then. Or maybe you're more of an easygoing or procrastinating kind of person. You're like, well, I'm moving on the 16th. I'll do it on the 15th. Good for you. But I know that I will sit and I will contemplate, well, what does the 16th mean? What can I achieve by the 16th? What haven't I done that I wanted to get done in this place before that happens? What is waiting for me on the 17th? Is it a totally fresh start? What day of the week is that? What was happening last year on the 17th? These are the questions that inevitably build up for me as these kind of dates and milestones approach. And I think it is just something about the power of knowing. In a life of things being so uncertain, you can both look forward to and in the future look back on this very specific day, this very specific hour when the chapter ended and the next chapter began, because the moving of the chapters was marked by you were once here and now you are there. I mean, like with most of the things that I discuss here within, I don't think that this is unique to me. I don't think I'm the only person who, categorizes or thinks about these moments as having some importance to them. Of course, like people move all the time and it does mean things. But, I do wonder if people think about them to this extent. Certainly maybe not enough to lie down in an exquisite piece of furniture like this and chat about them into a microphone. But, I think that's sort of been the intensity of this moment that I'm feeling, is that not only am I feeling all those emotions that I've been talking about, but also I'm kind of reflecting on the fact that I feel those things at all. And the sort of, I haven't been here very long in Rome, and it's been a fucking pandemic. Don't know if you've heard. And I don't speak the goddamn language here, so it's definitely been a very different experience in terms of meeting people. But for that reason, and also, I mean, Jesus, I'm past my 20s. Do you know what I mean? But for that reason, I mean, meeting people has meant that much more. And the people that I've met have sort of taken on that much more significance. And it's each of those people that, as this chapter closes, I suppose, I should be clear. I am planning to come back. I mean, I'm planning to come back to Rome. So it's not even that long a trip. which again is like, that's what I've been reflecting on this week and longer, is that I feel these feelings probably in a short span of time. I think saying goodbye in any instance I find difficult. But here it is, it's sort of a long enough time. Again, it doesn't feel like a vacation. It feels like a move, but a short enough time that like I'm not packing up my entire life, and I am planning, as I say, on coming back. But still, not having these new friends here. We haven't had the time simply to get to know each other well enough that we might not keep in touch every day. We might not call each other every day. So it's sort of, there's a sadness because there's a potential maybe risk, I guess, to leaving at this sort of crucial stage in becoming friends with someone, when you do have to put in the time and put in the work and be present to build that connection and build that foundation. And so it just was really important to me to see everybody that I've known over here, not in one place, but like each of them individually, catch up and say goodbye before I go. And I try not to be maudlin about it, but that's what I'm doing. It's sort of a last dinner, drink, hang out, whatever, to say goodbye. Maybe not literally, but just kind of, that's not the agenda. I just want to make sure that we touch base before I bounce. And I did that before I left Toronto. Again, even though there was so much going on with, Jesus, this was before vaccines. And so we were doing crazy things like meeting in the park and sitting X meters apart, and feeling terribly sad that we couldn't hug each other before we departed. And then, we felt like idiots when months later, of course, everybody was hugging and it was all fine, but that obviously was not particular to us or the moment. It was particular to the moment. It wasn't particular to us. But again, even though those were the circumstances where we weren't allowed to see people, for very good reason, I still wanted to see everyone individually to say goodbye. And we tried to follow the rules and we tried to follow the guidelines. But of course, inevitably, you're like, well, I can't leave 2 weeks between each person that I'm going to see. I'm going to try my best to, get a test. I don't even know how available those were at that time. But you try to play safe and you try to play by the rules. But I knew it was something I had to do. Again, I don't think that's unique. I think people wanted to also say goodbye to me and send me off and wish me luck and etc. And that's lovely and that's wonderful to feel that way. But to me, it was like, it's that feeling that you talk about at New Year's Eve. People say, oh, however you spend New Year's Eve is how you're going to spend the year ahead. And I that's sort of the feeling that I get. It's like, well, if I say goodbye to people and we together emotionally come to a conclusion that both of us feel comfortable with, then we can, I and hopefully they can move forward. But for me, it is, like I say, very specifically, I feel like it's this new chapter scenario. And I feel like I can start that new chapter grounded, resolved. There's an element of, you don't want to go with unfinished business. Not that every move turns me into a ghost. And, what is it that I'm trying to control there? I think is the question that I don't have an answer for. What is it? What would happen? what would happen if my business were unfinished? Because there's sort of an element of the moving and the leaving and the relocating that means doesn't really fucking matter, does it? Because if you leave unfinished business in the last place, then there's an element of it that can't catch up with you and can't reach you. So it doesn't matter to leave it unfinished because it's not going to remain unfinished where you are. It is in the sense that it wasn't finished, the obvious sense. However, your moving facilitates a fresh start, of course. So, what is it that I'm trying to control in those moments? But like I say, it's that New Year's Eve feeling of like, well, this is it. I got to wrap it up. I got to get it done now. I got to tie a bow on this. And that both feels satisfying and feels rewarding, feels like a conclusion, feels spiritually good to place things neatly in a box and say, awesome, that was that. And also allows you to start that fresh start, which is the inevitability of the moving, of the relocating, of the being in the new place, with a clear mind and not hanging on to whatever was happening before. That's not to say you don't miss things. That's not to say you aren't sad to have, left whatever behind and be starting, from the ground up, of course. But you can be sad and you can miss things without regretting. And I think it's really important to me that you have that lack of regret. And I don't have the answer on why it matters so much to me, but I do think that it is a fundamental aspect of human nature. There's something about the before and the after and the threshold between the two. We're a species that we've done a great job at defining spaces that we use for shelter and, so many myriad other things, architecturally speaking. And a huge part of those is the thresholds. You go from one room to another. You go from indoor to outdoor. And I think that's a very physical representation of the kind of feeling that I'm talking about. Mine is very, like I say, very location-based, but also very time-based, but also very, socially based. There is, now I'm here, now I'm there. And there's something just very powerful, I think, socially powerful, and, sort of potentially magical about that threshold. There is a moment, an indefinable moment, where one is not the other, where one passes through and can't go back, because to go back is to pass through a threshold of its own. Because you're going through that threshold in another direction and time has already passed. You can't just go back into a room, because if you've already left the room, then that's one chapter closed. You're outside of the room, even if just for a brief moment. To enter back in is to cross a brand new threshold. And again, it's like if we really get into this sort of woo-woo side of it, I think there's something magical about that. I think that humans have evolved socially to live in this way, where we define these spaces and we define time, and it means something to move between spaces and move between times. And I don't know why I feel all of those so acutely. And I don't know if it's to do with all of those, grander ideas that I'm talking about there, and those architectural ideas and witchy ideas, right? I don't know if it's really to do with all of those, or it's just really about the people, which is why I focus so much on these exit interviews with all my closest friends before I leave a place. But because certainly I've always had issues with the latter. My mum loves bringing up, I mean, I guess she used to bring it up all the time, that it was really hard to pick me up from places when I was a kid because I would just kick up shit and I would cry and I would not want to leave and I would have trouble saying goodbye. And because my mum is who she is, she sees this as a slight that I didn't want to come home. and that's what she's, that's always the punchline of her story whenever she tells it, that I just hated being home so much and hating being around them. And I don't know, I'm here to do therapy, so tell me if you think that is actually the case, but I don't believe that to be true. I don't think that I was crying because I didn't want to go home with my mum. I just, nothing about that rings true or familiar to me, recognizing that it was, I'm talking about 25 plus years ago. But I just find it the most telling part of the story that she tells is not just that I would cry and I would have difficulty leaving, which is, again, that's what I think I have problem with, not the going to, but the leaving from. She tells really vividly that not only would I cry and be upset, but very specifically, there's several instances, she says, where I literally held on to the door frame of places and had to be dragged away. And you can just imagine little me. I had a lot more hair then, fantastic bowl cut, holding on with my wee fingers to the door jamb as my mum's like tugging on both my feet. The guests, the hosts, I should say, who've been having me as a guest all that time, sort of looking increasingly awkward, like the play date's over. They're ready to be rid of me. My mum's being like, he loves being at home, really. I promise you, he's never like this. And she's tugging at my legs, trying to tear me away from the door. I'm getting my little fingers in. That's just always a way I've thought of it. And again, it's like, I'm sure that my mum feels the way she feels because, again, she probably had to say that to someone like, oh no, he's not crying about coming home, I promise. I'm sure that that's the impression that I give. And I am sorry for that she had to defend the wonderful home she raised me in that manner to our friends. But again, I just... knowing now how I feel about myself, when I'm rarely ever leaving where I am to go to my parents' home. So I don't think it's about like hating going there, because every single time, no matter where I'm going, it's about that, the sadness of leaving, the heaviness of leaving, the intensity of leaving, the recognizing that the moment is so definable. It just, imagine if any of your life could be like that. I think you'd feel a similar way. I think about, graduating university. It's coming. When that final exam is. When you're moving out of the house. So again, I guess it's the same scenario, but it's just like, I feel the pressure to end things in a conclusive, satisfying, spiritually restful way, and not leave things tangled, messy, unclear. shout out this podcast. And yeah, that's what's weighing on me this episode. And that's what I've been thinking about a lot. So I hope you'll join me in saying goodbye to this lovely place for the briefest period. Again, not forever. But, this is where this podcast came to life. This is where this creative endeavor was birthed. And so it does mean a lot to me to not do it here for a little bit. And I hope I'm still doing it by the time I lie back down in this chair. So yeah, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to hope that you'll continue to listen. And I want to say goodbye. Not forever, in terms of the release schedule, probably just for a week or so. But this is the last time I record in this room, in this chair, for a little while. So let's all say goodbye. Ciao.